How did Napoleon Bonaparte, a man born into a modest Corsican family, rise to dominate Europe, crown himself Emperor of the French, and forge an enduring legacy? His military brilliance and political acumen were crucial, but there was another often overlooked tool behind his meteoric rise: propaganda. Napoleon was not just a conqueror, he was a master of perception. By carefully shaping how the public saw him, he turned himself into a mythic figure. Through newspapers, art, and public events, he created an image of a heroic, infallible leader, inspiring loyalty among his people and fear among his enemies. This wasn't accidental. Napoleon understood the power of controlling the narrative. Every report from the battlefield, every painting, and every public statement was calculated to amplify his reputation. By manipulating public opinion, he ensured that his name became synonymous with greatness. But propaganda wasn't just a tool for self-promotion, it was a weapon. It helped him win battles before they were even fought by demoralizing opponents and galvanizing his troops. His mastery of this art was centuries ahead of its time, and his tactics are still studied in leadership and media circles today. Today, we'll uncover how Napoleon used propaganda to build his empire, control his people, and cement his place in history. His story is a fascinating exploration of how perception can shape reality, a lesson as relevant now as it was 2 centuries ago. Napoleon's mastery of propaganda began long before he became emperor. During the Italian campaign of 1796 and 1797, as a young general, he realized that controlling the narrative was as important as achieving military victories. He issued detailed bulletins about his campaigns, which were published in French newspapers. These reports painted a heroic image of Napoleon, emphasizing his bravery, intellect, and leadership. Setbacks were conveniently left out, and victories were often exaggerated. The French public, hungry for triumph after years of revolutionary chaos, embraced these stories, viewing Napoleon as a savior of the nation. One of Napoleon's most famous tactics was portraying himself as a liberator. In his bulletins, he claimed to bring the ideals of liberty and equality to the regions that he conquered. While this rhetoric resonated with the revolutionary spirit of the time, his actions often contradicted these claims. Nevertheless, the narrative worked, bolstering his popularity both at home and abroad. Napoleon also used art as a tool to shape his image. Paintings commissioned during his early campaign showed him as a larger-than-life figure. Jacques-Louis David's iconic Napoleon Crossing the Alps depicted him heroically leading his troops, even though he actually crossed the mountain on a mule. By crafting a public image of himself as a bold and virtuous leader, Napoleon transformed a mere general to a national hero. His propaganda not only rallied the French people, but also intimidated his enemies. This early success in controlling his image laid the foundation for his rise to political power, culminating in his coup d'état and eventual crowning as Emperor of the French. Napoleon's use of propaganda reached new heights during his coronation as the Emperor of the French in 1804. This event wasn't just a political or ceremonial milestone, it was a carefully orchestrated spectacle designed to solidify his image as a leader chosen by destiny. Unlike traditional monarchs who were crowned by the Pope, Napoleon took the crown from Pope Pius VII and placed it on his own head. This act was deliberate and symbolic, showing that his authority came not from the church, but from himself. The moment, immortalized in Jacques-Louis David's famous painting, The Coronation of Napoleon, emphasized his self-made power and positioned him as a master of his own fate. But the coronation was only one part of Napoleon's propaganda machine. He understood that symbols and imagery were powerful tools to shape public perception. His imperial regalia, for example, was filled with references to ancient Rome. From the laurel wreath to the eagle insignia, these symbols connected him to the glory of the Roman Empire, suggesting that he was a modern Caesar destined to restore Europe to greatness. Napoleon's propaganda also extended to the battlefield, where he cultivated the myth of his invincibility. He personally crafted military bulletins that glorified his victories and downplayed or ignored his defeats. After major battles, his reports would emphasize his genius and the bravery of his troops while painting his enemies as weak or treacherous. These accounts were widely circulated in French newspapers, ensuring that his image as an unstoppable leader remained intact. The myth of invincibility wasn't limited to the press. Napoleon ensured his presence was larger than life by commissioning monumental works of art and architecture. The Arc de Triomphe, for example, was ordered to commemorate his victories and to remind the French people of their emperor's greatness. His personal life also became part of the narrative. Napoleon's marriage to Josephine was portrayed as a romantic union, adding a layer of humanity to his public image. Even after their divorce, his portrayal of their relationship helped maintain his image as a man driven by both duty and emotion. By the time Napoleon had crowned himself emperor, his propaganda machine had turned him into more than a ruler. He was a symbol of French power and unity. His myth of invincibility inspired loyalty among his people, and his army creating an aura of inevitability about his rule. However, this carefully curated image came with a price. The higher the myth elevated him, the harder the fall would be when cracks in his invincibility began to show. Napoleon's grip on power wasn't just maintained by his military conquests or political reforms. It was secured by his ability to control the narrative. He understood that information was a weapon and he wielded it masterfully. One of Napoleon's key strategies was his control over the press. As emperor, he established strict censorship laws to ensure that newspapers and journals published only content favorable to his regime. Independent publications were shut down, and editors who defied his directives faced severe consequences. This control allowed Napoleon to shape how the French public perceived his rule. Napoleon didn't just suppress dissent, he actively promoted stories that glorified his achievements. Official bulletins and proclamations emphasized his victories, often exaggerating their scale and significance. Defeats, when mentioned at all, were framed as minor setbacks caused by bad luck or treachery. Art, literature, and theater also became tools of his propaganda machine. Napoleon commissioned works that celebrated his leadership and reinforced his role as a hero. Paintings like Jacques-Louis David's Napoleon in His Study depicted him as a tireless leader, working late into the night for the good of his people. Statues and monuments in cities across his empire reinforced his image as a larger-than-life figure. Even his legal and educational reforms were used to bolster his narrative. The Napoleonic Code, while genuinely innovative, was framed as a gift to the people from their benevolent ruler. Schools were required to teach a curriculum that glorified Napoleon and emphasized his role as the protector of revolutionary ideals. Napoleon's propaganda extended beyond France's borders. He used it as a weapon to demoralize his enemies and sway neutral parties. Leaflets and pamphlets were distributed in enemy territories, spreading messages that highlighted the weakness of their rulers while portraying Napoleon as a liberator. This level of control wasn't without challenges. As Napoleon's empire grew, cracks in his propaganda machine began to appear. His defeats in Spain and Russia couldn't be hidden, and the opposition voices found ways to spread dissent. Nevertheless, Napoleon's ability to control the narrative allowed him to maintain power far longer than many of his contemporaries. Ultimately, Napoleon's mastery of propaganda didn't just secure his rule, it shaped his legacy. Long after his fall, the image he cultivated continues to define how he is remembered as a genius, a hero, and a man of destiny. Napoleon Bonaparte's use of propaganda was revolutionary in its time, but its techniques and strategies remain strikingly relevant today. In many ways, Napoleon was a pioneer of the modern media playbook, understanding the power of controlling public perception and shaping reality through calculated messaging. One of Napoleon's most enduring tactics was his ability to create a personal brand. He knew that his image as a decisive, heroic leader could inspire loyalty and fear both at home and abroad. This practice of branding a leader, complete with iconic symbols, slogans, and visual imagery, is now a cornerstone of modern political campaigns. Napoleon also mastered the art of storytelling to sway public opinion. His battlefield reports, which often exaggerated victories and minimized defeats, served the same purpose as today's press releases or social media updates. Just as governments and corporations manage their narratives through curated information, Napoleon's bulletins ensured that only his version of events reached the public. Perhaps most striking is his use of visual propaganda. Paintings like Napoleon Crossing the Alps were the 19th century equivalent of viral media. These carefully crafted images spread across Europe, reinforcing his persona as a heroic, almost superhuman figure. Today, leaders use photographs, videos, and memes in much the same way, shaping their public image with highly curated visuals. Even Napoleon's control over education and cultural institutions has modern parallels. By ensuring that schools taught a curriculum that glorified his rule, Napoleon laid the groundwork for what would now recognize as media influence on public consciousness. Modern governments and corporations use similar strategies, leveraging media and education to promote ideologies or build brand loyalty. The parallels don't even end with politics. Napoleon's use of propaganda to demoralize his enemies is mirrored in modern psychological warfare and information campaigns. From targeted ads to misinformation on social media, his legacy as a master manipulator of perception lives on in the digital age. Napoleon's propaganda machine offers timeless lessons about the power of the narrative. His ability to control how the world saw him allowed him to maintain power for years, even in the face of growing opposition. It's a testament to the enduring power of messaging, a force as influential now as it was in Napoleon's time.